Hello, dear friends. I'm Mr. Davis. I've been teaching for 38 years, and today I need to share with you the most devastating and ultimately redemptive story of my entire career. This is a story that nearly destroyed my life, cost me everything I held dear, and then 2 decades later, came full circle in the most unexpected way imaginable. What I'm about to tell you sounds like something out of a movie, but I swear every word is true. It's a story about false accusations, ruined lives, guilt, redemption, and the incredible power of truth to eventually surface, no matter how deeply it's been buried. It was September 2002, just over a year after 9/11's, when America was still reeling from the attacks, and suspicion was running high everywhere. I was teaching at Roosevelt High School in Detroit, Michigan, a predominantly low-income, inner-city school where I'd been working for 8 years. The students there faced challenges most people couldn't imagine: poverty, violence, broken families, and limited opportunities. But I loved teaching there. These kids needed someone who believed in them, someone who wouldn't give up on their potential, despite their circumstances. I prided myself on being able to reach even the most difficult students, the ones other teachers had written off as hopeless. That's when I met Alex Rodriguez. Alex was 17, a senior in my advanced world history class. He was brilliant, easily the smartest student I'd taught in years. He had this incredible ability to analyze complex historical events, draw connections between different time periods, and articulate his thoughts with remarkable clarity. But Alex was also angry, defensive, and deeply suspicious of authority figures. He came from one of the poorest families in an already struggling neighborhood. His father had been deported when Alex was 12. His mother worked 3 jobs just to keep their small apartment, and Alex himself worked nights at a grocery store to help pay for basic necessities. Despite all this, he maintained excellent grades and had real potential for college scholarships. Alex was also intensely political. He would challenge everything I taught, questioning American foreign policy, criticizing government actions, and expressing views that were, well, let's say they were very critical of the United States. In the post-9/11 climate, his outspoken anti-American rhetoric made other students and some faculty uncomfortable. But I encouraged his intellectual curiosity. I believed that questioning authority and thinking critically about government actions were signs of a healthy democracy. I wanted Alex to channel his anger and intelligence into productive outlets, maybe even consider a career in journalism or political science. Looking back, that encouragement would prove to be my downfall. The incident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday in October. We were studying the Cold War, specifically discussing American interventions in Latin America during the 1980s. Alex became particularly heated during our discussion of U.S. involvement in Nicaragua and El Salvador. "Mr. Davis," Alex said, his voice rising, "how can you teach this stuff and pretend America are the good guys? We destroyed these countries, supported dictators, killed innocent people. We're the real terrorists." Some students shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't unusual for Alex, but his tone was more aggressive than normal. "Alex," I replied calmly, "I'm not pretending anything. We're examining historical facts. It's important to understand that foreign policy decisions are complex, and we can discuss the moral implications without resorting to inflammatory language." Inflammatory. Alex stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "What's inflammatory is covering up the truth. What's inflammatory is teaching propaganda to make kids think America can do no wrong." "Alex, please sit down. We can discuss this respectfully." "No," he shouted. "I'm tired of this brainwashing. You want us to memorize dates and battles while ignoring the real crimes our government commits. Maybe someone should know what's really being taught in this classroom." He grabbed his backpack and stormed out, leaving 25 students and 1 teacher sitting in stunned silence. I was concerned about Alex's outburst, but I dealt with emotional students before. I thought he just needed time to cool down. I had no idea that his angry words, "Maybe someone should know what's really being taught in this classroom." 3 days later, on Friday morning, I was greeting students at my classroom door when Principal Thompson approached me with a grave expression. "Mr. Davis," she said quietly, "I need you to come to my office immediately. There are some people here who need to speak with you." My stomach dropped, In the post-9/11 era, unexpected visits from people who need to speak with you were never good news. In the principal's office sat two men in dark suits. They introduced themselves as Special Agents Morrison and Chen from the FBI. "Mr. Davis," Agent Morrison said, his voice professional but stern, "we've received a complaint about activities in your classroom that may constitute promoting anti-American sentiment and potentially supporting terrorist ideologies." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I'm sorry, what?" Agent Chen pulled out a notebook. "A student has filed a formal complaint alleging that you've been using your position as a teacher to spread anti-government propaganda, express support for America's enemies, and create a hostile environment for students who support American foreign policy." "That's absolutely ridiculous," I said, my voice shaking. "I teach history. We discuss all perspectives on historical events. That's called education. The complaint specifically mentions statements you allegedly made supporting the 9/11 attacks, expressing sympathy for terrorist organizations, and encouraging students to oppose the American government," Agent Morrison continued. I felt like I was going to be sick. "That's completely false. I have never ever said anything supporting terrorism or the 9/11 attacks. This is insane." "Mr. Davis," Principal Thompson interjected, "the FBI needs to conduct a full investigation. Until this is resolved, you're suspended with pay pending the outcome." The next few weeks were a nightmare beyond anything I could have imagined. FBI agents interviewed dozens of my current and former students. They searched my classroom, my home, my computer, my personal files. They spoke with my neighbors, my friends, my family members. The local news got hold of the story. "High school teacher under FBI investigation for terrorist sympathies." My name and photo were plastered across television screens and newspaper headlines. The story went viral online, with thousands of people commenting on articles about me, calling me a traitor, a terrorist sympathizer, worse. My wife Linda received death threats. Our house was vandalized twice. Our teenage daughter Emma was harassed at her own school by classmates who had seen the news coverage. The stress was unbearable for our family. Most devastating of all was the reaction from my colleagues and the community I'd served for 8 years. Some teachers supported me, but many avoided me, afraid that association with me would damage their own reputations. Parents demanded I be fired immediately. The teachers' union provided legal support, but even they seemed uncertain about my innocence. For 6 months, the investigation continued. FBI agents re-interviewed students, reviewed every lesson plan I'd ever written, analyzed every assignment I'd given. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. I had never promoted terrorism, never supported violence, never expressed anything remotely resembling anti-American sentiment beyond normal academic discussions of historical events. But the damage was done. Even when the FBI finally closed the investigation with no charges filed, even when they issued a statement saying the allegations were unsubstantiated, the cloud of suspicion remained. The school district offered to reinstate me, but the atmosphere had become impossible. The school district offered to reinstate me, but the atmosphere had become impossible. Parents still didn't trust me. Some students were afraid of me, and my effectiveness as a teacher had been permanently compromised. In June 2003, I submitted my resignation from Roosevelt High School, ending my career in education. At 42 years old, with 2 children to support and a reputation in ruins, I had to start over completely. The worst part was never knowing who had made the initial complaint. The FBI wouldn't reveal the student's identity, citing protection of minors and ongoing investigation protocols. I spent countless hours wondering which of my students had so fundamentally misunderstood my teaching, which young person I'd tried to help had instead chosen to destroy my life. I suspected Alex, given his angry outburst and his threat about someone needing to know what was being taught in my classroom. But I had no proof, and honestly, I tried not to think about it too much. Dwelling on the identity of my accuser would have driven me insane. Linda and I struggled for years to rebuild our lives. I took a job selling insurance, then later worked in retail management. We had to sell our house and move to a smaller apartment. Emma, who had been planning to attend an expensive private college, ended up going to community college instead because we could no longer afford the tuition. The psychological trauma was perhaps worse than the financial hardship. I suffered from depression, anxiety, and PTSD symptoms. I would wake up in cold sweats, reliving the moment when those FBI agents walked into the principal's office. I became paranoid about my interactions with people, constantly worried that anything I said might be misinterpreted or taken out of context. Linda was incredibly supportive, but the stress took a toll on our marriage too. We went through several years of counseling to work through the trauma and rebuild our relationship. Emma thankfully was resilient and ultimately successful, despite the disruption to her plans. But I never stopped missing teaching. Education had been my calling, my passion, my identity. Being forced out of the profession I loved felt like losing a part of my soul. Sometimes I would drive past schools and feel this profound sense of loss, wondering what my life might have been like if one angry student hadn't decided to destroy it with false accusations. Years passed. I learned to live with what had happened. Though I never fully got over it, I found some measure of peace in my new life. But there was always this underlying sadness, this sense of injustice that could never quite be resolved. Then, 20 years later, everything changed. It was a Saturday morning in October 2022. Linda and I were having coffee in our small apartment when we heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and we rarely had unannounced visitors these days. I opened the door to find a man in his late 30s, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, standing next to what was clearly a very costly luxury car. He had dark hair, kind eyes, and a face that looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't quite place him. "Mr. Davis," he said, his voice uncertain. "I'm not sure if you remember me. My name is Alex Rodriguez. I was in your world history class at Roosevelt High School." I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. Alex Rodriguez, the angry 17-year-old who had stormed out of my classroom 20 years earlier. The student I had always suspected of being my anonymous accuser. But this wasn't the furious teenager I remembered. This was a successful, confident man who looked nervous and remorseful. "Alex," I said, my voice barely above a whisper.
"What are you doing here?"
"Mr. Davis, I need to talk to you. Please, I know I have no right to ask, but would you give me a few minutes of your time? There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you 20 years ago." Linda appeared behind me, curious about our unexpected visitor. I introduced Alex, though I didn't mention my suspicions about his role in my past troubles. "Would you like to come in?" Linda asked politely. Alex shook his head. "Actually, I was hoping Mr. Davis might take a ride with me. There's somewhere I'd like to go, somewhere we can talk privately." I looked at Linda, who nodded encouragingly. Despite my apprehension, I was intensely curious about why Alex had sought me out after all these years. We drove in his Tesla to a quiet park near the lake. As we walked along the path, Alex was clearly struggling with how to begin whatever conversation he'd come to have. "Mr. Davis," he finally said, stopping and turning to face me. "I need to start by saying I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for what I did to you." My heart started pounding, so it had been him. "I was the one who called the FBI." Alex continued, tears forming in his eyes. "I was the student who accused you of supporting terrorism, and everything I said was a lie." Even though I had suspected him for 20 years, hearing him confirm it was still shocking. "Alex, why? Why would you do something like that?" He sat down on a park bench, his head in his hands. "Because I was 17 and scared and stupid, and I made the biggest mistake of my life." "Scared of what?" Alex looked up at me, his face filled with anguish. "Mr. Davis, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound unbelievable, but I swear it's the truth. 3 days after I stormed out of your classroom, I was approached by 2 men outside my apartment building. They said they were federal agents, though I never saw any identification. I sat down beside him, my mind racing. These men told me they had been monitoring my family because of my father's immigration status and his political activities before his deportation. They said they had evidence that my mother was in the country illegally and that they could have her deported immediately if they wanted to. My stomach dropped. "Oh my God, Alex." They said the only way to protect my mother was to cooperate with them. They wanted me to provide information about teachers or students at school, who might be expressing anti-American sentiments or promoting dangerous ideologies. And you told them about me? Alex nodded, tears streaming down his face. I panicked. I was just a kid, and these men were threatening to destroy what was left of my family. When they asked if any teachers had been promoting anti-government ideas, I thought about our argument in class. I thought about how you always encouraged us to question authority and think critically about American foreign policy. He paused, struggling to continue. I convinced myself that maybe you were actually doing something wrong, that maybe your teaching really was inappropriate. I told myself I was protecting the country and protecting my family. So I called the FBI hotline and reported you. But Alex, you must have known that what you were saying wasn't true. I never supported terrorism or the 9/11 attacks. I know that now. I knew it then too, deep down, but I was terrified, and I was 17 years old, and I made the worst decision of my life. I told the FBI that you had expressed support for America's enemies, that you had created a hostile environment for patriotic students, that you were using your classroom to promote anti-American ideology. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and strangely, relief. After 20 years of wondering, I finally had answers. What happened after that? I asked. The men disappeared. I never saw them again, never heard from them again. My mother was never deported, never even contacted by immigration authorities. I graduated, got a scholarship to MIT, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. Me too. Alex nodded. Full scholarship for computer science. After graduation, I started a tech company. We developed AI algorithms for financial trading. The company went public 5 years ago. I'm worth about $60 million now. I stared at him in shock. The angry, poor teenager from Detroit had become a multimillionaire tech entrepreneur. But none of that matters, Alex continued, because for 20 years I've carried the weight of what I did to you. I've followed your life from a distance, Mr. Davis. I know you had to leave teaching. I know your family suffered. I know I destroyed your career and your reputation based on lies. How did you follow my life? Private investigators. I hired them about 10 years ago when my company started becoming successful. I needed to know what had happened to you, how badly I had damaged your life. When I learned that you'd never been able to teach again, that you'd lost your house, that your daughter had to change her college plans, he broke down completely. I realized I had ruined the life of the best teacher I'd ever had. We sat in silence for several minutes while Alex composed himself. Mr. Davis, you were the only teacher who ever believed in me. You saw potential in an angry kid from the projects when everyone else saw a troublemaker. You encouraged my intellectual curiosity. You challenged me to think critically. You treated me with respect when most adults in my life treated me like a burden. Then why? I asked, my voice breaking. If you felt that way, why did you destroy me? Because I was 17 and terrified and facing an impossible choice. Because I thought I was protecting my family. Because I was too young and too scared to realize there might be other options, other ways to handle the situation. Alex reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Mr. Davis, I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back 20 years of your life, 20 years of teaching students who needed you, but I can try to make amends. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $5 million. I stared at the check, unable to process what I was seeing. Alex, I can't accept this. Yes, you can. You have to. This isn't charity, Mr. Davis. This is justice. This is me trying to compensate you for the career I stole, the reputation I destroyed, the years of suffering I caused you and your family. This is too much. I don't need $5 million. It's not too much. It's not nearly enough. Ald, do you know what my company is worth? What I'm personally worth? This $5 million represents less than 10% of my net worth. Given what I took from you, it's actually insulting how small this amount is. I looked at the check again, my hands shaking. $5 million would change everything for Linda and me. We could retire comfortably, help Emma with her own family, maybe even travel and see the world. There's something else, Alex said. I want to make this public. I want to hold a press conference and tell the world what really happened 20 years ago. I want to clear your name completely. Alex, you don't have to do that. It would probably damage your reputation, your business. I don't care about my reputation. I care about yours. For 20 years, there have been articles and blog posts and forum discussions calling you a terrorist sympathizer. Your name is still associated with those false accusations. People who Google you still find stories about the FBI investigation. He was right. Even now, 2 decades later, my name was permanently linked to those terrible allegations. I've already contacted several major news outlets, Alex continued. 60 Minutes wants to do a segment on the story. The Washington Post is interested in a feature article. I want to tell the world that you were innocent, that you were the victim of false accusations made by a scared teenager who was being coerced by people claiming to be federal agents. I sat there trying to process everything Alex was telling me. The boy who had destroyed my life was now offering to restore my reputation and my financial security. Why now? I asked. Why wait 20 years? Because I was a coward, Alex admitted. Because I was building my business and didn't want the scandal. Because I told myself you had probably moved on and forgotten about it. Because I was selfish and weak and afraid. He paused, looking out at the lake. But last year, my daughter started kindergarten. Watching her with her teacher, seeing how much she loves learning, how much she trusts the adults who are educating her, it made me realize what I had taken away from you. You weren't just a teacher to me, Mr. Davis. You were a mentor, a role model, someone who genuinely cared about my future. We Bellers and Ariel Sev, one night and Tommy. I did care about your future, Alex. I still do. I know, and that makes what I did even worse. You cared about me. You believed in me, you encouraged me to pursue my dreams, and I repaid that kindness by destroying your life. We talked for another 2 hours, sitting on that park bench overlooking the lake. Alex told me about his business, his wife, his daughter. I told him about the struggles Linda and I had faced, the years of rebuilding, the therapy and counseling that had helped us heal. As the sun began to set, Alex asked me a question that surprised me. Mr. Davis, do you think you could ever forgive me? I thought about everything I had lost. My career, my reputation, my financial security, 20 years of teaching students who might have needed me. I thought about the nights I had lain awake, wondering which student had betrayed me, the depression and anxiety I had battled, the way the false accusations had changed the trajectory of my entire family's life. But I also thought about the 17-year-old Alex Rodriguez who had sat in my classroom, brilliant and angry and desperate to make sense of an unfair world. I thought about the impossible position he had been placed in by adults who should have protected him instead of exploiting him. Alex, I said finally, I forgave you a long time ago. I forgave you before I even knew it was you who had made the accusations. How is that possible? Because I was a teacher, and teachers understand that young people make mistakes, sometimes terrible mistakes, when they're scared or confused or facing impossible situations. What those men did to you was unconscionable. They put a 17-year-old boy in an impossible position and then disappeared, leaving you to live with the consequences. Alex started crying again. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about what people deserve, Alex. It's about letting go of anger and bitterness that only hurts the person carrying it. I couldn't spend 20 years hating a student I had once cared about. We drove back to my apartment in comfortable silence. When Alex dropped me off, he promised to call me within the week about arranging the press conference and media interviews. Mr. Davis, he said, as I got out of the car, thank you for being the teacher you were. Thank you for believing in a kid who didn't deserve it. And thank you for giving me the chance to finally make this right. 6 weeks later, Alex and I appeared together on 60 Minutes. The segment was titled The False Accusation, All Teachers' Nightmare, and a Student's Redemption. Alex told the entire story, the FBI investigation, his false accusations, the years of guilt and regret, and his decision to finally come forward with the truth. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people reached out to express support and outrage over what had happened to me. The school district where I had taught issued a formal apology and offered to reinstate me with full honors, though I politely declined. My daughter Emma called, crying with joy that her father's name had finally been cleared. But perhaps most meaningful were the messages I received from former students, not from Roosevelt High School, but from the schools where I had taught earlier in my career. Dozens of people wrote to tell me how I had influenced their lives, how my teaching had made a difference, how proud they were that their former teacher had been vindicated. Alex used some of his wealth to establish the James Davis Education Foundation, which provides scholarships for students from low-income families who want to become teachers. He also funded a program that trains educators to recognize and support students who might be facing coercion or manipulation by adults. As for the check he had given me, Linda and I decided to accept it. We used part of the money to pay off our debts and secure our retirement. But we also donated a significant portion to organizations that support teachers who have been falsely accused or unfairly dismissed. Today, at 62 years old, I can finally say that my name has been cleared and my reputation restored. The nightmare that began 20 years ago is truly over. But this story isn't really about money or vindication or even redemption. It's about the complicated relationship between teachers and students, about the way young people can be manipulated by adults with ulterior motives, and about the power of truth to eventually surface, no matter how deeply it's been buried. Alex Rodriguez was 17 years old when he made the worst mistake of his life, but he was also 17 years old when he was placed in an impossible situation by adults who exploited his fear and vulnerability. The real villains in this story aren't Alex or even me. They're the mysterious men who used a scared teenager to pursue their own agenda and then disappeared, leaving both of us to deal with the devastating consequences. I'm proud that Alex grew up to become a successful, compassionate man who was ultimately willing to sacrifice his own reputation to restore mine. His courage in coming forward, after 20 years, shows the kind of integrity that I always knew he possessed, even when he was an angry teenager struggling with circumstances beyond his control. As teachers, we never know which of our students will change the world, which ones will remember our lessons years later, which ones will carry our influence with them throughout their lives. Sometimes, that influence manifests in ways we never expect. Alex Rodriguez destroyed my career with a lie, but 20 years later he restored my reputation with the truth. In the end, the student I had believed in, encouraged, and cared about found the courage to do the right thing. That's the power of education, the hope that keeps teachers going even in the darkest moments. The boy who almost destroyed me ultimately saved me. And in doing so, he proved that it's never too late to make amends, never too late to tell the truth, and never too late to honor the teachers who believed in us when we needed it most.